I wouldn't let my sisters rent out my home for money. That's when everything changed. So, here's the deal. My sisters, the entitled ones, demanded that I let them rent out my vacation home for profit. Naturally, I said no. But, as you'd expect, their husbands decided to break into the place, and now they're facing charges. This all happened today. To top it off, my parents decided to throw a barbecue because, that's just what older folks do. I wasn't interested, so I turned them down. I really don't get along with my sisters, their husbands, or their kids. My wife and I are child-free, after all. But then my mom started pressuring my wife, so, long story short, we ended up going. By the time we showed up, there were already about 25 people there. My sisters and their husbands were pretty well buzzed. Basically, they were drunk. My mom spent all her time chasing after my nieces and nephews, who were around 6 to 12 years old, trying to keep them from causing chaos. Meanwhile, my dad had retreated to the whirlpool area of the pool with a small cooler full of beers. My wife and I just mingled with some random people, ate some food, and had a frozen margarita. As usual, my sisters and their husbands took turns giving us a hard time for being late, not being in our swimsuits, and basically ruining the vibe. Typical suburban summer gathering stuff. About 30 minutes in, 3 of the kids sprinted at one of the neighbor guests who was standing by the pool and pushed her in. She was right by the steps, so she stumbled in but didn't fall in fully, just got half wet. She was clearly pissed off, but she didn't make a scene. She just walked over to the parents, grabbed a towel, dried off, and left. My sisters and their husbands thought the whole thing was hilarious. A little later, I was chatting with someone a few feet away from the pool when I noticed 3 of the kids charging at me from the corner of my eye. It wasn't hard to figure out what was coming. I just stepped aside at the last second, and they all went flying straight into the pool at full speed. Most of the guests, including my wife and me, started laughing, but the moms, who were pretty hammered, completely lost it. Turns out, 3 of the kids couldn't swim, even though they were in their swimsuits. Since I wasn't in swim gear, I just stepped back from the pool and let the others handle getting the kids out. The kids were crying like they just lost a limb. That's when everything went crazy. The 4 drunk parents started yelling at everyone, especially me, saying I almost let their kids drown. On top of that, 2 of the kids had been recording the whole stunt on their parents' iPhones, which, of course, ended up at the bottom of the pool. One of my brothers-in-law jumped in to try to grab the phones, but with his BMI and BAC, that wasn't going to happen. Nobody else volunteered to help. No surprise there, since my sisters were still going off at everyone. I told my sisters it was their responsibility to keep an eye on their kids, and if anything had happened to them, it was on them, not me. Things got heated, to say the least. Eventually, my wife and I left after one of the brothers-in-law tripped and face-planted while yelling at us. Now they're all saying I should have just let the kids knock me into the pool, let them have their fun, and ruin my phone in the process. So, about Sophie? Oh, and a quick side note. Dad, of course, never bothered to get out of the whirlpool. Just thought that was worth mentioning. Now, a few thoughts from me. I get that they're just kids and they were probably just having fun, but honestly, the fact that they thought that kind of behavior was okay says more about their parents than it does about them. I just really wish we hadn't gone. Don't get me wrong. It's nice catching up with my parents and their neighbors, but I really can't stand being around my sisters and their husbands. They don't even try to hide how much they envy our lifestyle, and honestly, they're just exhausting to deal with. So, let me give you a bit more context on why I don't get along with them. It's like oil and water for us. I've never been close to my sisters, especially since they're 9 and 11 years older than me. I don't have much in common with their husbands either. They're decent guys, don't get me wrong, but I just couldn't care less about the stuff that matters to them, and they feel the same way about me. The 4 of them are definitely envious of how my wife and I live our lives. Both of my sisters are stay-at-home moms, and their husbands are doing well financially. One of them actually makes more than I do. But my wife and I both have professional careers, we don't have kids, and we're much more responsible with money. Because of that, we have a lot more investments and savings, plus we don't have to deal with cars full of kid clutter. We also take nice vacations once or twice a year. I know this all gets under my sister's skin, and it's clear their husbands feel the same way. So yeah, we get a lot of petty behavior from them. Honestly, neither my wife nor I enjoy being around them, which is exactly why I didn't want to go to that get-together. It just wasn't worth it for me. But my wife, she's a lot more positive and generally enjoys seeing them. Hopefully, the next time around, she won't feel so pressured into going. That's probably the one good thing that'll come out of this whole mess. My wife is definitely more tolerant and forgiving than I am when it comes to my siblings, but based on what she said on the way home, I think she's pretty much done with them too. And yeah, my dad is pretty awesome. He's super laid back. He loves being around people, used to work in sales, so he's great at engaging with everyone. He just likes people to have a good time, and now that he's retired, he's really enjoying life. So, my dad and two of the guys with him just sat there watching everything go down. Mom's cool, but the whole situation did get to her a bit. As for the kids, they're fine. By the time we left, they were inside watching TV. I think they're around 8, 10, 11, and 12 years old. It was the middle three who decided to play kamikaze with me. I'm betting the 12-year-old was the one who egged them on. She's usually the ringleader. You phrased the part about my parents hosting the barbecue kind of funny. I had to trim down the post to fit within the character limit. My folks are pretty social and love having people over. They've got the perfect house for entertaining and are always coming up with some excuse to host something. They wanted everyone over for the 4th of July, but one of my sisters and her family were away on vacation. So, they turned it into a fake 4th of July party, complete with flags, red, white, and blue decorations, barbecue, a margarita machine, all that. They promised sparklers for the kids too. My nieces and nephews were the only kids there. All the neighbors are older, like my parents. As for the situation, I'm pretty sure most people would agree with me, so I've been voted not the a-hole. Update September 20th, 2024, almost a month later. First off, my folks tell me the kids are all good swimmers and use the pool all the time. The 8-year-old is still a beginner, but he loves the water. My sister just said they couldn't swim to make me look bad. But to be honest, none of the kids are allowed in the deep end, which is where they fell in. It was actually the two 11-year-olds and the 10-year-old who tried to push me into the pool. After we left, things at the party ended on a pretty bad note. My drunk brother-in-law, the one who face-planted while yelling at me, had to go to urgent care to get stitches in his face. He was too drunk to drive, so my dad had to take him. Dad was really not happy about the whole situation. Later that evening, my sisters started a group text and said some pretty nasty things. Their husbands threw in a few comments too. So, my wife and I blocked all 4 of them. Then my mom called me, clearly upset about what had been said. She and Dad were in the group chat, and honestly, I don't blame her. Because of those texts, my parents insisted that my sisters and their husbands come over the next day, Sunday, without the kids, to clear the air and set some boundaries. At least, that's how my mom put it. What followed was a half-hearted apology from my siblings, delivered through my mom's phone. I'm glad my wife was there when they called. Her sharp looks kept me from saying exactly what I wanted to say. I just thanked them for the apology and told them we didn't need to discuss it any further. Thinking everything was settled, I unblocked them. But that evening, I got a text from one of the brothers-in-law saying the phones cost $4x and asking when I'd be paying for them. What the hell? I replied, never. Took a screenshot of his text, and forwarded it to my parents with a note saying we were done with this nonsense. I told them we were going no contact with my sisters and their spouses, and that we didn't want to be invited to any more whole Sophies or get-togethers if they'd be there. Then I blocked them all again. That's when things really started to blow up. Dad called them and gave them an earful. Among other things, he told them that the grandkids weren't welcome at his place anymore. At least not for the foreseeable future. Since my mom usually does free babysitting, that really got them worried. He also banned them from using the vacation house and reminded them that it's actually my wife and I who own it, not him and Mom. Totally threw my sisters off, both of them. Our families use the place a lot. Friends come up for weekend getaways and everything. But this was completely out of character for my parents. It was obvious they'd reached their limit. Just so you know, I never wanted my sisters to find out we owned the place. We got it for my parents because they'd always wanted a mountain retreat. Keeping the ownership quiet was just a way to avoid any drama with my siblings. A few days later, my sisters and their husbands showed up at our house without warning, hoping to apologize in person. We were out at dinner, so they left a note. One of my sisters also called me at work, but I just let it go to voicemail. We've decided that going no contact is probably the best move for the foreseeable future. We haven't spoken to them in over 3 weeks. Honestly, I'm done with them, let them deal with it. How's life been since then? It's been less than a month, but I've got to admit blocking them has actually made things a lot more peaceful. I didn't realize how much constant low-level drama they were bringing into our lives. It's not like they're bad people, they're just exhausting and petty. And as for them using the weekend place, I really couldn't care less. Technically, it's ours, but we bought it for my parents. They have full control over it and decide who gets to use it when they're not there. We cover all the operating costs and taxes. The one upside to all this mess is that now we've figured out what we'll do with the property when my parents get older. I've been gearing up to take over managing it, sorting out weekends, keeping it up, handling all the details. But now it's clear, we'll just sell it. If we want to head up to the mountains, we'll grab an Airbnb instead. Guess that's a little bit of a bombshell for my parents. Honestly, my parents aren't clueless, they're just really chill about everything. They've always been live and let live types. I'm pretty sure they'll get over this sooner or later, but that's up to them. For now, we're still avoiding all family events. What sucks for my sisters is they're probably freaking out, thinking I'm going to block them from using the cabin. I won't. That's my parents' decision until they get older. And it's also a hard stop on one sister's dream of turning the place into some kind of family compound once we inherit it. I've known about that plan for a while, but I've just let it slide. Usually, the lots up there only have one decent spot for building, but this property is much bigger because it's tucked away at the end of a road. There's enough room for at least 3 houses, all with amazing views. But honestly, they're not apologizing because they're sorry, they just want something from me. I'm with you on this one, their apologies don't feel real. And as for interacting with them anytime soon? Not happening. The vacation home situation? That's entirely up to my parents. Sure, it's technically mine and I cover all the costs, but I bought it for them. They're the ones who decide who gets to use it. They're great people who always wanted a place to call their own, but there's no way they could have bought it without our help. I was able to buy the house for them because, luckily, I've been doing well financially. I've been saving and investing like crazy, plus I got a huge bonus the same year I sold my house and moved in with my wife. I don't mind if my parents let my siblings use the house, but I have to admit I'm kind of enjoying the fact that my sister's uncomfortable after finding out I could afford to buy it and let them use it without ever mentioning it to them. Last week, my dad changed the lock code when they went up, so now only he, my mom, my wife, and I have it. As for my mom watching the kids, she tells me that once a week, she and sometimes my dad go to each of my sister's homes and spend the day with the kids. When school starts, she's planning to pick up each set of kids from school on different days and take them home, spending the evening with them. She says it's too much when all 5 are together, but they're fine when they're separate. Both my mom and dad have told me they don't plan on having my sisters and their families back to their place anytime soon, and they're actually enjoying the quiet. I think they were already getting fed up with the old dynamics and used the whole pool party drama as a reason to shake things up a bit. By the way, here's a fun little thing about why my post got removed from Sophie. According to a message I just saw from another mod on that sub, the reason was property damage. I still don't get it. Was it because the phone got wrecked? That's just ridiculous. Quick update. As of September 29, 2024, just 9 days after my last post. Well, it's been a wild few days. I thought things had gotten crazy before, but it was nothing compared to what's happened this week. To make sense of it all, I should probably give a little financial context. My parents have never been great at saving money. I've been handling their taxes for years, so I pretty much know all there is to know about their finances. Their house is paid off and they don't have much debt, but they didn't really save up for retirement. Both of them get Social Security, my dad gets a decent pension, and they have a small savings cushion, but there's no hidden fortune stashed away anywhere. I bought them their current car as a retirement gift after they stopped working so they'd have something nice to drive. It was the first car they've had in probably 22 years that wasn't leased. My sisters are under the impression that our parents are loaded and that they'll be leaving everything to them since I don't need the money. Because of that, they've never bothered to save either. It turns out my oldest sister and her husband, who have 3 kids, have been living way beyond their means for a while now and are in serious financial trouble. They've maxed out their credit cards and are behind on their car leases to the point where one car is about to be repossessed. He used to brag about making a lot of money each year, but it turns out he was only making about half of what he said. She spilled all of this to my mom on Tuesday because they need a loan. And here's the kicker, which totally blew my parents' minds. For the last 3 years, instead of using the vacation house regularly, she's actually been renting it out once a month or so, pocketing the money. We're talking $2,500 or more for a weekend and at least $4,500 for a week. Now that she's cut off from using the place, she's already had to cancel one booking. She's worried they're going to lose everything. My parents definitely aren't in any position to give them a loan. My other sister knew about the renting, but of course, she never mentioned anything. I have a feeling she might have done the same thing because one time I went up there to drop off an ATV I'd fixed and there was a family there. They said they were staying there with my sister's family and that they'd gone into town for something. At the time I just brushed it off, thinking maybe she had loaned out the house to some friends. But I've always wondered about it. I found all of this out through my parents, who are really stressed about it, my mom more than my dad. He's mostly just really pissed off. I know he feels betrayed. And I'm sure he's embarrassed that he can't help his daughter out. He did make it clear, though, that as long as it's up to him, my sisters won't be using the vacation house anytime soon. They kept me in the loop because they knew my sisters would be coming after me next. And they were right. On Thursday, my sisters showed up at our place again, but this time they came without their husbands. They waited outside until I got home. I had to decide whether to make a scene by arguing with them in public, let them cause a fuss if I went in without them, or just let them in, so I ended up letting them in. I got the usual BS story from my older sister, with the younger one backing her up about why I needed to let them use the mountain place again right away. They also said I've been a terrible brother and that it's my responsibility to pay for their kids' college tuition because that's what family does. I let them tell their side of things, then called them out based on what my parents had told me. And that's when everything went south. Denial, crying, cursing, yelling, everything. I swear, my ears are still ringing from all the noise, even 2 days later. I won't lie, I said some really harsh things to them, but nothing that wasn't true. They finally left after about an hour. After they left, I took a shower and then just laid down to rest. When I woke up, my wife was home and her first words were that she had to block more phone numbers because my sisters had been blowing up our phones from new ones. My parents messaged me yesterday asking me to call. I'm sure my sisters have given them some twisted version of what happened, but I'm not ready to go over it all again. I'm usually a pretty upbeat person, but this whole situation has really worn me out. I barely had enough energy today to drive up to the vacation house and lock the entrance gate with a padlock. I'm the only one with a key, so that should be enough to keep my siblings out. They probably collapsed trying to walk 430 yards uphill to get to the house. Here's the next update. Update 3, October 15th, 2024, about 2.5 weeks since the last one. Another update on the chaos that is my extended family. Figured it was time to fill everyone in on what's been happening the past 2 weeks. After my sisters came to my place, my parents told me they were done dealing with the vacation home. It sounded like the sisters had been pressuring them to let them use the place again. Basically, my folks handed over all the responsibility to me and said it was my problem now. Up until that point, they had been keeping track of who was using the house when, handling the maintenance, replacing worn-out items, and all that. Anyway, they decided they didn't want to get caught up in all the mess. While I don't blame them, I'm still pretty disappointed. The place was supposed to be something for them to enjoy and hang out in regularly. And honestly, I never cared that they let my sisters and their families use it because, in the end, I always thought that was up to my parents, even though I technically own it. But now, my parents are in a position where they won't have access unless I'm involved, and that really changes the whole vibe of the place. I've taken a few steps to secure it. Like I mentioned, I locked the gate with a heavy-duty chain and the best lock I could find. I also reset all the door keypads and created brand new codes. Yesterday, I had security cameras installed, which actually turned out to be pretty cool. The installer convinced me to add a high-rise camera that overlooks the valley. It ended up costing me a lot more than I expected, but honestly, the peace of mind is worth it. The installer also put up signs on the property saying the place is monitored by video. On top of that, I installed a heavy-duty lock for the water shutoff valve. I just hope I don't lose the keys to it because if I do, getting it off will be a real pain. I haven't told anyone, except my wife, that the water is locked off, and only we have the keys. Last week, both of the husbands called me separately at my office, trying to convince me to let them use the house like they always have. The older one went up with some friends for a guy's weekend, but couldn't get in because of the gate lock. He was pretty pissed off and embarrassed about being locked out. I'm sure he would have tried to break the lock if he could have. During his call, he kept flipping between being pushy and acting like a victim. At one point, he even threatened to rip the gate out of the ground. He also admitted they'd been renting it out to a few friends, said they needed the money, and accused me of ruining their business. He actually suggested I refund their guests' money. Me? Hell no. I should have recorded the call, but I don't even know how to do that from an office phone. The other call just sounded like he was being forced to make it by my sister. He didn't really argue when I told him not to bother trying to use the place again. In the end, I told them they couldn't use it and not to ask again. At this point, I'm seriously considering selling the vacation home. My wife and I aren't going to use it enough to make it worth keeping, and it's not like there's going to be any family reunions there anytime soon. I brought up the idea of selling it to my folks, and their response was pretty much whatever. I'd easily double my money by selling it. The place consists of 3 lots with amazing views, and it's at the end of a private road. But I'll probably wait a while before selling. Doing it now would be more of an emotional decision. My sisters and I aren't talking right now, and I have no intention of reaching out. I'm not sure what the situation is between them and my parents, and frankly, I don't want to know. On the bright side, we spent a nice evening with my parents last week. We went to a new restaurant that was really good. Nobody brought up any of this mess. Mom did update us on the nieces and nephews, and she's spending time with them at their homes. Sorry this update isn't full of laughs or big wins, but that's just life sometimes. Update post 4, October 16th, 2023, 1 month later. Couple of people asked for an update, so here it is. I hired someone to manage and keep an eye on the vacation home. He lives locally, takes care of his parents, and manages quite a few properties. Some are vacation rentals, others are weekend places like ours. He has access to the camera feeds, and he does a physical check on the place every week or 2. Honestly, I think he has the best job in the mountains. He gets paid to drive around with his dog, walk around the properties, and hang out on people's decks whenever he feels like it. He also monitors a camera feed from a house near the start of the private road, which takes still shots whenever a vehicle goes by. He charges me $450 a month. Plus he does basic maintenance and repairs as needed. He's also friends with all the sheriff's deputies, which is reassuring. Honestly, it's been such a relief to have him on board, and he even sends photos from his walks to everyone once or twice a week. I have to brag a little about my parents. I got all this from them tonight at dinner. They've been getting pressure from my sisters to make me open up the vacation house for Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving there had become a big tradition for the family, but honestly, not for me or my wife. We've only gone once in 7 years. My dad refused to push me on it because he knew I'd say no. Instead, they came up with a plan that I think is pretty great. They announced that they were organizing the Thanksgiving gathering, and if everyone chipped in for the cost up front, they'd rent an Airbnb in the mountains. If that didn't work, they'd host Thanksgiving at their place, or one of my sisters could host it. This led to a big argument between my sisters. The middle one was all in for doing the Airbnb thing, but the oldest doesn't have the money for it. The deadline for committing to the Airbnb has already passed, so it looks like Thanksgiving will be at my parents' place instead. But honestly, we won't be there. My parents have asked us not to sell the house just yet. They still want to keep using it every now and then, but only once my sisters come to terms with how things are now. Of course, they'd probably love for everyone to gather there again sometime in the future, but I'm not holding my breath on that happening. I'd be fine with selling it and moving on, but I can live with keeping it if my parents still get some use out of it every now and then. Plus, the value will only go up over time. My wife and I have cut off contact with my sisters and their husbands. Both of them have tried calling me from new numbers, thanks a lot, Google Voice, and they've left messages saying we need to meet up for a family talk about how we can all share the vacation house. They've even called my wife too. I'm honestly glad I've gotten into the habit of not picking up calls from numbers I don't recognize. I can't decide if they're just out of touch with reality or if they think they can pressure me into giving them access again. Either way, I don't really care. My parents told me the oldest sister and her husband are both getting out of their leases for their SUV and that giant truck of theirs. They're also selling their jet skis and some other stuff they've never even used. It's going to be tough on her, though. She's always been a bit of a show-off, and I'm sure she won't like being seen driving something older, smaller, or cheaper. Tom's whole identity is tied up with his truck. He even has a small tattoo of the truck company's logo on him. Honestly, that's just one of the many reasons why we never really hung out. A few people have suggested I turn the vacation house into an Airbnb. But that's not something I'm planning to do, at least not anytime soon. I know it could bring in money, but it would cause a ton of drama within the family and it'd really stress my parents out. They don't need the kind of headache. It'd also be a pain to clear out all the personal stuff my parents have in there. There's nowhere for that stuff to go. Plus, there'd be wear and tear on the house, and even though I'd hire a manager to handle it, I know it'd still take up some of my time. At the end of the day, it just doesn't feel worth it to me. Update, December 7th, 2024. 1.5 months later, I wrote most of this yesterday but decided to hold off posting it until I wasn't so worked up. That didn't help, I'm still pretty wound up. Sorry if this is all over the place, a lot's happened and it's tough to write it all down clearly. Things have really gone south. I honestly never expected anything like this to happen. To keep it short, my brothers-in-law broke into my vacation home and got arrested. They've been charged with breaking and entering, destruction of property, and communicating threats, all Class 1 misdemeanors. I've made it clear I won't drop the charges. I might consider it if they pay me back in full for the damage they caused. As of Saturday evening, they were still in jail, but I'm guessing they've been released by now. Things had calmed down, or so I thought. I hadn't heard from my sisters in over 6 weeks. My parents went up to the house for a week and had a good time. Chris, the property manager I hired, has been doing a great job. He's handled a couple of repairs I asked him to take care of, and I've given him a list of more things to work on. Every week, he usually sends a photo or two of wildlife or a sunset to his clients, and honestly, it kind of made me want to head up there myself. But then on the Fr Sophie after Thanksgiving, my brothers-in-law went to the vacation house. They used an angle grinder to cut through the chain on the driveway gate and ended up damaging the gate in the process. They tried getting in through the front door, messed up the lock set, and badly scratched up the door. Eventually, they managed to get in through the utility room floor door and another locked internal door. They even broke into the barn, though I'm not sure what they were trying to do in there. When they came out through the front door, they ran straight into sheriff's deputies and Chris. Chris gets notifications from the camera system whenever there's movement, so he saw what was happening and called the sheriff's department. According to Chris, my brothers-in-law tried to talk their way out of it, but the deputies weren't buying their story. Breaking into an empty house is a serious crime up there. Usually, it's meth heads who break in and steal whatever they can. When my brothers-in-law got arrested, they completely lost it, saying all kinds of things about how they were going to beat me up and whatnot. Not exactly the smartest thing to say in front of cops. Chris and the sheriff's office tried calling my wife and me to figure out what we wanted to do, but we were spending the day with her parents and had left our phones in the car to enjoy some vacation time. So, they booked my brothers-in-law on all the charges, which is exactly what I would have wanted them to do. From jail, they called their wives, who, of course, freaked out. They tried calling my parents, tried calling me, but I blocked them and even tried finding a lawyer in the area to arrange bail. That wasn't easy, especially since it's a rural area and it was a whole Sophia weekend. The oldest sister has no cash and her cards are maxed out, so if they made bail, my middle sister would have had to cover the cost for both of their husbands. I know they were still in jail as of Saturday afternoon. We didn't check our phones until late Fr Sophie on the way home from my in-laws' place. When we finally looked, there were a ton of calls and messages from my mom, dad, Chris, and the sheriff's department. Talk about ruining a great day. I was in such a good mood until I saw all the missed calls. My wife went through the texts and listened to the voicemails, then read them out loud to me. By the time we got home, I had a pretty good idea of what had happened. I tried to get my head back into a rational mindset and get past my anger, but it didn't really work. I called Chris to get the full story, and hearing about how bad the damage was just made me even angrier. I ended Fr Sophie by calling the sheriff's department and making it clear that there was no misunderstanding. My brothers-in-law had no business being on my property and I wanted to press charges. I didn't call my parents back. Barely slept that night. I waited until Saturday afternoon to reach out to my parents. They were both pretty shaken up by everything, especially my mom. My sisters had basically bullied them into telling me I should call the cops and say it was all a mistake and that I wanted the charges dropped. I flat out refused. I told them there was no way I'd do that until I spoke with an attorney, and definitely not until I was fully reimbursed for whatever it's going to cost to fix everything completely. By the time we got off the phone, my mom was crying hard, which of course made me feel like crap. My dad suggested it might be time for a complete fresh start, but he also said he thought they needed to pay for the damage they caused. I haven't gone up to the property yet. There's nothing I can really do for now, and honestly, I'll probably lose it when I see the damage in person. The photos are bad enough. I'm hoping to go either tomorrow or Wednesday, but my job doesn't really give me the flexibility to just take off for things that aren't emergencies. I've left messages with 2 attorney friends asking them to recommend the right lawyers for going after my sisters and brothers-in-law. I'm not exactly sure what my options are, but I'm hoping to get restraining orders against them. I've kept all the texts they've sent me, so that might come in handy. I'm seriously considering suing them for the money they made by renting the place. I don't even care about the cash, but it'll definitely help make their lives as miserable as possible. The gloves are off at this point. A couple of side notes. 1. My brothers-in-law had no idea I'd hired someone to keep an eye on the property or that there are cameras now. My parents knew but hadn't told them, figuring it would just give my sisters another excuse to stir up drama. 2. My wife is completely done with this whole situation. I don't blame her. She's been incredibly patient with all of it, but she's hit her limit and she didn't hold back in letting me know. She told me it's up to me how I handle this, but she thinks they all need to learn a hard lesson. 3. The oldest brother-in-law probably won't face any consequences at work over this, but the middle one has a security clearance, so he might. I'm really hoping that we'll push him to pay for the damages right away. 1. Chris, the caretaker, has an interesting background. I knew he was friends with some of the deputies, but I just assumed it was because they were all locals. Turns out I was wrong. He used to be a cop in a big city. He was shot on duty and decided to quit after that, moving to where his parents had retired. He has some PTSD from it all. His dog is a certified service animal and usually stays with him. I know law enforcement people tend to stick together, so I guess that's how those deputies became part of his friend group. 1. I don't ever want to see or talk to these assholes again for the rest of my life. I know that's in direct conflict with my intense desire to make their lives as miserable as possible. Just something I'm wrestling with. A lot of people have said I should have been tough about all this from the very beginning. I didn't go that route because I didn't want to stress my parents out, and honestly, I hate all this drama. But screw it, they're stressed out now anyway. My wife has pretty much stepped away from the whole thing. She doesn't want to hear about it anymore and says it's on me now. She'll probably come around, but I don't think she'll get involved beyond just listening to me vent. Edit: regarding why they broke in, this is just my guess, but I think they were planning to use the house for family getaways and were looking to rent it out again. According to Chris, it's deer season through the end of the year, so that could have been part of their plan. I know my brothers-in-law, the Thomas, have used the place in the past as a base camp for big group hunting trips. It can sleep a lot of people, so a weekend with friends could easily rake in thousands of dollars for them. Now, I'm just speculating, but that might explain why they broke into the barn. A few years ago, I bought a 6-seater mule and they definitely want to use that. I don't think they meant to wreck the place. My dad means a lot to both of them and they like him a great deal. Update: December 12th, 2024, 5 days later. I didn't expect to be posting again this soon, but a lot's happened in the last couple of days. To sum it up, I think we've finally turned a corner on this mess. Thursday afternoon, a courier showed up at my office with an envelope. Inside, I found a signed letter from both my brothers-in-law and a cashier's check for $6,000. The letter contained what I can only describe as a really heartfelt apology. Among other things, they admitted to breaking in, recognized it was wrong, and said the $6,000 was meant to cover the damages. They also promised they'd pay more if it turned out the cost was higher. They also assured me they'd stay away from the vacation home unless my wife and I specifically invited them. On top of that, they asked me to do everything I could to get the charges dropped as quickly as possible, claiming they could lose their jobs over this. They said they'd agree to a restraining order or whatever else needed to happen to make that possible. There was more to it, all of it apologetic, but that's the gist of it. To say this was a surprise would be an understatement. It was a complete turnaround from how they'd acted before. I'd already set up a meeting with a lawyer to discuss suing them for the damages and looking into a restraining order. I called the lawyer, told him about the letter and check, and he agreed to meet with me that evening instead of waiting until next week. He told me not to deposit the check yet. We met for about 2 hours. In the end, he recommended that my wife and I go for a settlement and mutual release agreement with all 4 of them, the sisters and the Thomas. He said that if we went ahead with a lawsuit, we'd likely win, but it would probably take 2 years or more. There would be hefty upfront legal fees and there was a chance we might never actually see any money. He also said that we could keep the $5,000, no strings attached, even if we didn't let them off the hook. He's working on the agreement, but it won't be ready until Monday. It'll include what's essentially the civil equivalent of a restraining order. I've already asked my property manager to get an estimate for the repair work. After the meeting, I called my lawyer and asked him to get me the most accurate estimate he could as quickly as possible. By Sophie, he had it. He thinks it'll cost around $3,500 to fix everything, with most of it going toward replacing the front door. On Sophie, my attorney reached out to each of the Thomas. He told them what we were proposing and advised them to get their own lawyers. Both of them agreed to it. The middle Tom said they could either pay for the damages or hire a lawyer, but not both. He figured hiring a lawyer wouldn't do much since they really had no defense for what they'd done. Their biggest concern, it seems, was whether the charges could be dropped. From what I can gather, they're willing to do whatever it takes, sign whatever's necessary, just to make this whole thing disappear. My lawyer also called the DA's office on Sophie to discuss the possibility of dropping the charges. He got the name of the prosecutor and left a message but hasn't heard back yet. He thinks the charges will likely be dropped since the Thomas are paying up and don't have any prior offenses, but he's not a criminal lawyer. He also told me to be ready to drive up there either Monday or Tuesday and personally tell the prosecutor I want everything dismissed. He's also advised me to keep my distance from the sisters and the Thomas, especially for the next 6 months. It'll be crucial to stick to the terms of the agreement when it comes to any future interactions with them. I'm guessing the Tom's change of heart comes from them finally realizing what's on the line, what this is going to cost them in legal fees, fines, and everything else. There's also the very slim chance that they could end up in jail for up to 100 days. And as I've mentioned before, one of them has a security clearance for his job, which could be in jeopardy. So, I'm thinking this is their last-ditch effort to salvage their normal lives. It's not a perfect solution to the situation, but at least it'll get me past the legal and financial nightmare that's been dragging on for the past few months. Honestly, I doubt I'll ever have a civil relationship with any of them again, and I'm okay with that. What I really want right now is to just put all of this behind me, move forward with my life, and never have to speak to any of them again. I'm just tired of all this. My wife feels pretty much the same way. On a bit of a side note, getting that written apology was, strangely, a huge moment for me. I never thought I'd get something like that, but it turns out it matters to me a lot more than I expected. The money doesn't feel all that significant right now, though I'll definitely take it. Also, I'm pretty sure it was my middle sister and her husband who came up with the money. They helped me out not just once, but several times to get me out of trouble. Seriously, they got me out of jail more than once.